Thank you for the invitation to speak here. My name is Ron van Erck. I work in DG Energy in the unit which is responsible or is dealing with the Renewable Energy Directive. And we commissioned a study that looks at local acceptance of renewable energy projects and more specifically what can be done to improve that local acceptance. And I'm here today to share very briefly what it is that we're doing and our preliminary findings, and to invite you all to our seminar on the 18th of November, which I'll come back to in the end. The study is called Reshare, and as everybody I'm sure is aware, Europe has committed to the so-called 20-20-20 strategy, 3 targets for 2020. One of them refers to a share of 20% renewable energy consumption by 2020. And I mean, a lot will need to be done in order to make that happen. Roughly the estimate is that we will need 35% of renewable electricity to get there. Not exclusively electricity will contribute to that target, but it will be a very significant part of it. So we'll get a lot of new wind, solar, biomass, hydro projects in the coming decade to come online, hopefully, in order to meet those targets. And in order to make sure that that happens, we put together this Renewable Energy Directive where every member state got a mandatory target. Now, part of the requirements that member state had was to tell us in what we call a National Renewable Energy Action Plan how they will actually go about achieving their target. And that plan, which we received now 21 out of the 27, gives us already quite a good indication on what types of volumes that will be developed according to the plans of the member states in each country. And this is an example of an overview for the increase that wind energy, according to the plans of member states, will go through between now and 2020. Now, if you look at the challenges that renewable energy projects and also wind, as an example of that, have been facing, it's been economic barriers. I mean, how to make a project economically viable. A lot of attention has been paid to development of support schemes. Grids, how can you ensure that these, as far as it concerns electricity projects, how can you ensure that these renewable electricity projects can actually transmit their electricity to the consumers? We have provisions in there in the directive, and also the Commission is working on an infrastructure package to make sure that the grids are able to take up these large amounts of renewables that will come online. But you will also need permits if you want to build renewable energy projects, and again, wind in particular. And I think, especially from our perspective, we haven't been focusing too much on the challenges that economic operators face when they want to get a permit, because member states are competent to issue permits, but largely, or an important part of the decision for a member state to do so depends on how local communities or the people in that country perceive wind energy. So, and a lot of time, this actually is an obstacle for economic operators when they want to develop a park or another renewable energy project, for that matter. So, we decided to look at how can we contribute to finding a solution to make this growth work when we look at the local acceptance which we need in order to get the permits and to get the construction in. So, this study that we did basically looks at all kinds of instruments that have been put in place to increase local acceptance of such projects. And I've been mentioning wind a few times. It's definitely a very important one, but it doesn't exclusively focus on wind. It looks at basically all renewable energy projects. So some of the preliminary results I'll give in a few slides the overview of. We basically identified 7 different types of mechanisms which are used to improve local acceptance. I'll quickly go through them. The first one is so-called community funds. So basically a project gives money to local communities which they can spend in a way they feel fit. An example is a project in the Netherlands, a large wind farm, where they give 10,000 euros to 5 villages which are in the vicinity of the park for a period of 20 years, and those towns can basically decide on how to spend that to improve their social structure. So it can be kindergarten, playground, or a library, or whatever. It's at their discretion. So that's a first example. The second one is what we call local ownership. So the developer basically grants or offers a share of the project to local communities or citizens. The third type is direct compensation. So, for instance, if you put a wind turbine on a piece of land, the owner of that land is compensated for the effects that may have. The fourth one is benefits in kind. An example of such a mechanism is a solar project in Rothenburg on an airport. The airport had difficulty or struggling to keep in to not go bankrupt, basically, and this added to the income of that airport. So the airport could make its business case again and remain open for a longer period of time. Then local employment or contracting. It's pretty straightforward. Construction is being done. People in the community get work in both the construction and the maintenance and operation. Energy price reduction. An example is Texel, where you can take part in projects, and by paying a fee, you get a reduced energy tariff on your bill. And then finally, the so-called indirect social benefits, projects that give prestige to an area because it's a highly innovative or impressive project which attracts ecotourism or people in general who are curious to visit the plants. Okay, so what we did is we looked at 20 case studies and which were successful in the application of such mechanisms, and these are the basis for the analysis that we're doing. You can have a look at them already. There is a draft version available on the website, which is indicated below. I mean, apart from the research, it's a valuable database for people to have a look at on its own. So for those interested, I definitely recommend to have a look. The preliminary conclusions, when we look and assess these different types of schemes and what works and what doesn't work and so on, is that first of all, the transparency when applying such mechanisms and political support are key. Furthermore, it is important that the returns are directly to the local community. Furthermore, it appears that the more indirect and softer mechanisms, such as tourism, prestige, and stimulation of the regional economy, seem to be quite effective in general. Direct involvement of citizens seems to be appealing, and it appears also that when you go for individual compensation, just pay off one or two persons which may have problems with the project that you are trying to develop. That is something which should be done with cautious, since that tends to create some problems. I only had a few minutes, so this is the overview. But I welcome you all to sign up for the seminar which we'll be having in a month and a half from now, when we'll finalize our research and have a more complete picture to present to you. If you want to get involved in the meantime, please go to the website, suggest interesting projects. If you want to participate in any other way, the contact details are below, and I hope that we will see each other on the 18th or receive some valuable contributions from your side that can feed in to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Can I clarify what's for you? What's the purpose, or for the Commission, what's the purpose of the research project? In the sense of you look at these, you look. I need you as a technical assistant here. But you look at these various projects. Do you get out of it a verdict on which benefit sharing mechanisms work better than others? Is that what you're trying to get? Is it almost a sort of on a case by case? These are the lessons, and then we share best examples. I'm trying to work out what the hard conclusions that you might get out will be.
Most importantly, we try to help developing a tool which is helpful for communities or even investors which struggle with these issues. We like to do that in a way where previous experience may guide people to choose for one or another mechanism. I don't think we'll conclude that this is wrong and this is right. I don't think there is such possible conclusion to be made. But I think by collecting the information and making it available to people that consider using these instruments, the lessons learned become available to them. So we can say, look, this has been effective in these cases. This is apparently causing troubles in these cases. Take that into consideration when thinking about these kind of issues.
Okay, so we know, because this is a knowledgeable audience, that the European Union has committed itself to this 20% of energy from renewable sources by 2020. Idea also of decarbonising energy sector by 2050. So obviously, if there is popular resistance to low carbon technologies, then Commissioner Hedegaard is going to run into problems. So, Commissioner Hedegaard, what do you make of that? How does that chime with your work as a commissioner, and for that matter, with your past experience as a minister in Denmark?
Thank you very much, Tim King, and thank you very much for putting this on the agenda. And also, I think it's very interesting to listen to what Ron just told us about these experiences. And I think I would allow myself to sort of draw two parallels to what I've sort of experienced in this field as a Danish environment minister and later climate and energy. Because I think we had one very fine example what happens if you do not sort of include all the things that Ron just mentioned and the information is not good enough, then investors just have to give up. It was a demonstration project for CCS, carbon capture and storage. And to cut a long story short, people simply felt very much afraid. It was dangerous. Could it explode? All these kind of things. And those who knew all the nitty-gritty details here knew that it was not at all dangerous, and why should you include a lot of citizens at this early stage, and it was just for demonstration. But in the end, they had to give it up because resistance simply became too big, and these investors had no clue what they were running into. So that is probably a good example where if they had had a checklist, try to consider this and that, then probably they would have been better off, or they would have not spent as much energy and money in trying to get the project through. The other thing I would like to mention to you is our experiences in Denmark on wind, because that's true that we will have to have a lot of wind up in Europe in years to come in order to live up to the renewables targets in a cost-efficient way. And back in the 70s and the 80s, when the wind turbines, or at that time it was almost just windmills, 12 meters high, 6 meters high, 15 meters high, they were standing on the plot, on the farmer's sort of, on his own plot. At that time, of course, they also did cast shadows. They also made some noise when the wind was in the wrong corner. But somehow the noise was the noise of money being made. And then it's easier to accept, because it was him and his wife earning the money themselves. And whether the wind turbine was there or not made maybe the difference between 1 or 2 vacations a year or not. You can live with some inconvenience then. Then the turbines grew taller and taller, and then it's investment projects. And of course it creates a lot of problems when you are living in a nice, quiet area and suddenly somebody else come to you and they want to invest and they harvest the money, but you still have the shadows and the noise and whatever there is. So we thought that we were running into a bit this not in my backyard thing. And I've been out sort of in front of some of these crowds sort of saying, why on earth should we accept this? What is in it for us? So actually what Denmark did 2 years back was to try to make a new legislation so that if you are an investor who wants to put up wind turbines, first of all, you have to offer part of the project to the local municipality and the local citizens so that they have a co-ownership. That in itself already helps a lot. That was very, very crucial to sort of reconnect between sort of having the disadvantages and seeing some of the money. We also created a green fund so that, for instance, if you do this to society, that your local place put up some wind turbines, then you can have a little share of the revenues from that turbine put into a green fund that could benefit your environment locally in a totally other way. That was also in order to create a bigger acceptance. Also, we have some rules, of course. You cannot just set up, it's simply prohibited in the planning law to put up wind turbines 5 times the distance of the wind turbine's height from where there are houses. Meaning, of course, that it's very, very difficult to put up wind turbines close to where there are lots of houses where people live. And then the final point was that there would also be some kind of individual compensation. I agree with what Ron said in his conclusion that this is one of the more tricky points. But if you can actually prove that due to this project, your real estate has diminished in its sort of official value, then you should have some kind of compensation. That was just some of the things. Of course, there would be hearings and things like that as well. But just to do these relative simple things, then it's a much more open and transparent decision in a local community whether do we want this or do we not want this. I also think there is a discussion that we would have to consider also at the European level. Should there be a prerogative if you locally can invest in wind turbines at your place instead of distant investors coming to your place? I mean, would that have a special weight if people locally can say, this is our mills? And I think that that is what it's basically about, that we try to reinstall some kind of feeling it is our wind turbines, it's our mills. And very final point, I mean, we are only humans, and none of us would have sort of liked to have things in our backyard. I would always say it's also not that pleasant to have a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired plant. I mean, there is something to everything, but it helps if you can prove that it benefits your personal economy. So somehow to take care that there is an economic incentive that is pretty crucial. And then I basically think that people are there now that they would like to contribute if they feel that the rest of the community somehow says, okay, you are doing something on behalf of the rest of us. And although tiny the compensation to the Green Fund or whatever, you feel that you are sort of carrying a burden for the rest of us, and then you have bigger acceptance. If I may, just the very last word, I think that it's very good that at the European level, at Commission level, we dig more into these behavioral things, because we are often discussing so much techniques and what could be done, but this behavioral thing, what will actually be needed in order to people to transform the way they they have behaved so far? There I think we do not know enough yet, so I hope I will have the chance also to listen to some of the behavioral inputs here today.
And I'm very conscious that this event is happening as part of the week of regions and cities, which is part of the reason why there were crowds that we were fighting through to get here. And indeed, some of this audience will be not from Brussels or spending much time in Brussels, but they will be involved in various different ways in regional and city government. In your talking about the Danish experience, and actually there's a presentation on the Reshare website about one of those Danish projects. Is there anything in the structure of Danish local and regional government which made Denmark better or worse suited to the kind of interaction that you've been talking about?
I think that our planning tools are very much with the local municipalities. And that is both good in the sense that they have sort of the connection with citizens. But in this sense, it's also rather problematic. Because then a local municipality, a mayor, should decide whether he wants to take the blame for such a project coming up in order to live up to some national targets being set. What is in it for him? And that was why actually the Green Fund was invented, because then suddenly the municipality could see, okay, if we do this, then we could get some money from the broader community, from the national community, in order to do some other things in the environmental field that we would like to do. Because there is not necessarily a connection between his interest and the national interest, the mayor's interest and the national interest. Why should they take the blame? One more thing. I think in one respect, things are different in Denmark, for instance, when it comes to wind. Because when in the 70s and the 80s, the textile industry was outsourced first to eastern part of Europe and then to Asia, unemployment was very high in some of the most windy areas in Copenhagen, in Denmark. Actually today, where we have world brands like Vestas and Siemens, that is an old headquarters for textile industries, where now thousands and thousands and thousands of green jobs have been created in rural areas. So to some of the citizens there is a very, very direct link between doing something in wind on your own market and creating jobs in your own region. So there it's very clear that there is a coupling.
I'm actually, because I'm conscious that the Commissioner has to leave, I'm going to turn to you, the audience, very, very swiftly for any comment or question for her. But in a desperate attempt to accommodate your desire to involve the behavioural stuff, I'm going to actually ask Nick Pidgeon if he has a question for the Commissioner or a comment for the Commissioner.
A comment. Well, one of the points I was going to make, which has come from academic research on this, is actually about the title, and I don't know if the Commissioner agrees with me on this, that the "Not in My Backyard" title, it may be unhelpful, maybe an unhelpful term, because it commonly refers to, or is defined in the literature as an individual who agrees in principle with the technology. So we know people actually like wind energy at a generic level, but in the specific context objects to local imposition of a wind farm or whatever. And immediately, it's actually quite hard to find individuals at a local level who hold both of those attitudes or positions simultaneously. So I'm wondering if the Commissioner have thought about the framing of this question in terms of not in my backyard. I could talk a lot about the research evidence about opposition to siting and technologies, but that's a slightly longer little piece, because I had about 4 points to make there. But just about the actual label we're using here.
Well, I wouldn't criticize that, because we know that is basically sort of a notion which is out there, and I think it's fair here to discuss that openly, that is sort of the initial feeling with many people. But, I mean, if we are talking the way towards a low-carbon society, I mean, then it's not in my backyard. I mean, then it will have to be somehow reflected in everybody's backyard. So I think that we should sort of find a way to portray this as a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. It's probably also what is implied in what you say. It's not something about that we cannot have mobility, that we cannot have energy, that we will have to go, you know, in grey and black and everything is very, very dull life. It's about doing this in an intelligent way, and hopefully also framing it that if we do it intelligently and timely, then those who are the front runners could actually also benefit from it. So I think we should also stress the benefits. And again, I think, I mean, man is man. So if there are some economic benefits, it's probably worthwhile also to use that argument instead of just appeal to people to do something good for somebody else.
I'm looking to the audience for raised hands. There's one over there. Press the microphone button and go.
Very interesting situation, comments, suggestions. And if I can add, I'm a professor of public policy with the University of Maryland, and I've taught in Texas for quite a while. Texas is a windy place, and it's a sunny place as well. But you can imagine for what reasons Texas is not really number one in the United States in renewables. California rather is, but politically the two places are very different. Now, unrelated to that, my question is this. Have we read this tiny little book? Is there a minute's automatic shut-off on this? Policy Paradox by Deborah Stone. Now, Policy Paradox teaches us that there are at least 9 ways to define fair. I've seen 7 different benefit-sharing mechanisms, and the Commissioner actually suggested another couple that were not in the original 7. And I would say that the two that the Commissioner suggested were more fair than the other 7. None of them are equally fair. If I own the land, I would say, excuse me, but I would want 50%. You can tell me that the wind belongs to the investors, but it doesn't really. It belongs to the community more so than the investors. You can argue that, but if we read Deborah Stone, we figure out that there have to be best ways to involve those communities in the decisions exactly in this type of discussion. Now, my question follows up. Are we creating 2-level citizen classes where the early adopters are better off than the late adopters? Or the non-adopters that do not want green dump their waste or dump their energy production that is not green to another class, right? So you have the EU15 benefit and the EU12 not benefit so much. Is this something that is embedded in the not in my backyard? Is the not in my backyard affecting equally all communities everywhere? Thank you.
The answer to your question is no. I don't think that we are creating such a 2-class Europe. And I think that the way that we constructed the climate and energy package, at least to a certain degree, guards us against that, because each country will have to sort of make their own renewables targets. They have been sort of told what they have to do. And there was this, for some of it, you could actually, if you were Germany, you could buy some projects in Bulgaria, but only to a limited degree. And I think that there, the market forces and the prices would regulate that. If they do not want it in some place, they can just say, we do not want it. So I think that we, by making national targets in the effort sharing, there I think that we took care that everybody will have to do a thing. But of course we have a chance compared to Texas. Now you mentioned Texas. I think that Texas is number 1 in wind in the US in wind. But it's also pretty much easier in this sense to be Texas than to be, for instance, Denmark or Austria or whatever densely populated thing we have, because they have these vast areas. And there we have a special challenge in Europe, because we do not have these big vast areas, at least not in most of our member states.
Thank you. My name is Kurt Bungertz from the European Court of Auditors in Luxembourg, and I very much appreciated Ron's presentation and also the Commissioner's, what she calls relatively simple solutions to making people accept the necessary renewable energy. But what would be your solution for making people accept the additional grids that we need in the European context? I mean, we can build, I don't know how many wind parks in the North Sea. We need to transport the electricity to the main loads in Europe. So what can we do? I don't think there is a question about second holidays or 3 times holidays. I mean, there is no personal incentive for people to accept it.